all of a sudden, instead of saving money, it's costing them money. It's big time. 5 to 8 times more expensive to put things on an airplane, depending upon the volume and the weight situation. And sometimes it's even more. So that is one that's really, I find, one of the biggest ones where companies don't realize they have to plan for that, or they have to really do things to make sure that product is ready on time so it can be surface shipped. Yes?
And there's the cost of lost orders or delayed orders when you don't get the product. So that's an additional cost.
You're right, yeah.
Cost of your
Sure.
business with
You
your
lose customers, you have to expedite on your end, yeah. All kind of issues like that. And here's some other ones, utilities and energy. People think that because labor is cheaper, that energy and utilities are cheaper. And it's not. You know, most of them are based on fuel costs. It's not labor intensive, these items. So I've been to regions where actually the electricity costs more than in the United States. There are places where it is, where oil is more. Because, you know, we pay a lot for gasoline and oil and diesel, but in other countries it's actually more expensive. And for some reason, companies think because labor is 20% of the cost that they plan on, if they're running the factory, they cut the electricity usage in half. And it usually doesn't happen. You can probably, as a rule of thumb, just keep it the same. Generally, it's not cheaper, except in certain areas. Local politicians. Again, you really need to be concerned in third world countries that you get the local politicians to support you, because without their support, you're not going to be successful, unless you're just buying from a supplier. But if you're involved in there in your own operation or a joint venture or something, you really need to get to know the politicians. Also, they can help you to introduce you to companies, because there's a very much of an interconnection there. So when I take clients to these third world countries, I say the first thing we're going to do is we're going to find out who the mayor is, who the influential local politician, forget about national level, local politician is. We're going to take that person to dinner and we're going to get to know that person, because that's who you need to get close to. Different than here, much different. And a lot of Americans don't realize that, and other foreigners. Development time, it just takes longer to get things done. Things happen slower in overseas locations. So you go to Latin America, the concept of time is different, and getting things done in a timely manner is different. And in other countries, even where people are more in a hurry to do things, like China, there's more of a consciousness of time there. You still have bureaucratic things to deal with, and you need to plan for this development time. Yes?
Back to politicians, can you speak a bit to bribes and bribe avoidance?
Yeah, well, avoidance is, first of all, it's illegal. Okay, there's no question about that. If you get caught, it's illegal. And it really puts companies in a bad position, because sometimes they don't have any other choice. It's expected. Okay, and sometimes I guess it has to happen. Yeah, I've never been involved directly with anything like that, luckily. Because that would put me in a bad position to be part of it. Okay, the other thing is companies, they start doing work overseas, and they get an engineer to say, okay, we need you, we're moving this work over here, we need you because you're the technical person, we need you to spend some time over there. So maybe you'll have to go 2 weeks, maybe 3 weeks, once a quarter to help them. Shouldn't be any problem in it. Guy wants to keep his job, he's threatened, he has a young family, goes over there. Okay? All of a sudden he goes over there, 3 weeks isn't enough, 4 weeks, 5 weeks happen. It's happened to me where I got stuck there for many, many weeks. And he can't come home. He gets home within a week or two, something goes wrong, he's on a plane back there, and he says, that's it, I have a family, I'm not doing this anymore. Okay? I'm not going to do this. So what the company does is, okay, we'll move you and your family over there. An expensive operation. Okay? Expensive. Besides their salary, what you got to pay for is a nice place to live, a driver, an interpreter, a maid, okay? And the real thing is an international school. Anyone have any idea what that costs?
Yeah.
How much? Yeah, right, about that, yep. My daughter is at her 3rd international school now. She worked at one in Switzerland, and she was in Africa for a while. Now she's in Bangkok, her and her husband working. And yeah, it's about the equivalent of about $42,000 a year, more than a college. So if somebody has 2 kids, over there to put it in an international school, it's expensive. All of a sudden you're paying somebody 3-4 times their salary it's costing you. Very expensive operation, plus for trips back and forth, plane trips. You're flying them back, the person back, you're flying the family back 2 or 3 times a year, okay? 4 or 5 tickets at a time, it gets expensive, okay? So that's another hidden cost that you have. And again, sometimes it makes sense, but what I tell companies is plan it all in and make a good financial analysis for it. Okay, another one is the in-country support, the support you need. Again, if you're dealing with the foreign location, you need more time, usually on site. Okay, I tell companies, you need to have time on the ground. Okay, you can't get away with anything relative to technology with a seagull visit. What I call, what a seagull visit is? Right, yeah, like seagulls. They fly in, crap all over you, and fly out. Okay, that doesn't work. You need to spend time there. When I started to work for Timex, I realized I wasn't going over to Asia for a week or Latin America. When I wanted to go over there, I was minimum of 3 weeks. And sometimes it was 4 and 5, yeah. You just had to have the time on the ground. There was no other way it's going to work. Okay, also, if you have an operation and you're moving your operations, it's not happening as much now because a lot of companies aren't actually shifting work. But when that was happening, you needed to have 2 operations going, and that was expensive. GM got in trouble about 15 years ago where they opened up a plant and they couldn't get the new product there through their qualification process to start using product from the China plant. And they were ready, they negotiated something with the UAW when the UAW was very strong 15 years ago. They negotiate closing the plant. All of a sudden they had to keep it open longer. They had to go back to the UAW and say, well, we want to keep the plant open another 6 months. And they paid a lot of money for that because the UAW really had GM. Okay, so that's another one, not as much. All the travel costs, the startup developmental costs, the routine visits, and then problems going over there. I told you before, a plane ticket is expensive, especially last minute to get people over there. All these travel budgets, all the executives that have to go over there, whether they're needed or not. All of these visits, all these travel costs. When I worked for Timex, I had $150,000 a year budget just for me, and another $250,000 for my staff. That was in the corporate office. Travel budget. That's how much it was. And sometimes I went over that budget. Okay, you can eat up money real quick. So that's another one. And again, you need to plan for it. It still is a good thing to do. I'm not saying that it's not a smart thing to do. Another thing is, another cost, retention of key personnel, keeping people. It's real important there. And a lot of times you have to, if you're getting into a situation where people are being pirated, and it happens a lot, where you'll start an operation or you'll train people for a supplier in a particular area for the supplier, and another company doing the same type of work moves in down the street, they start pulling the people away, and you go through having to train new people again. Another one is the prepayment of product. Here, you buy product. Who's here is in purchasing? Okay, you buy product here and you buy it, you get the product and you pay for it a couple months, a month or 2 after you get it. You buy stuff offshore, when do you pay for it? Yeah, you pay for it when you order it, yeah. So you have all that money tied up, sometimes 6 months, but you don't have it. Companies don't calculate that into it, how it negatively affects the company's cash flow, okay? The legal risk. If you buy stuff and it's not right, You buy it from a place like China, and you're responsible for it. You have the legal risk. You're going to pay the consequences. It's almost impossible to pass that on to another one. So you are holding the bag. You know, all the legal risk is usually the company who's buying the product in there, and a lot of companies don't even realize that. Quality issues. You know, all these issues with quality, having to buy stuff even earlier, besides all the shipping time that you need to do to buy stuff earlier, okay, that affects your cash flow. It's the extra inspections. A lot of companies, you know, really didn't have to do that much inspection of product when they bought from trusted suppliers here. Now it's bought from overseas, and you need to do extra inspections. In fact, there's a lot of mandated inspections now for some chemicals. You must do it. Textiles is another big one. A lot of small mom and pop shops that were importing textiles from places like China, and well, Dominican Republic is another one, where they're bringing them in. The past few years there's been laws enacted where they have to do testing for certain things. They can't rely on testing overseas. They have to do it in this country. They can't rely on certificates of compliance. And what happened is these companies, because the testing is so expensive, they just went out of business. They just couldn't afford it. It wasn't in their margins. So that's another thing, all these extra inspections and tests. Okay, a few, yes?
Yeah, it's hidden things that are added to your lead time and you don't realize. Like we have some products that we buy from a company in Japan, and because it's not vegetable based, it's animal based, it gets to U.S. Customs. Oh, do you have this certification, this certification, this certification? Yeah. So what you thought was an 8-week lead time now is a 13-week lead time.
It's held up, yep. Especially bovine, anything that has bovine derivatives in it.
This is like real derivative from lamb.
Yep.
So you're basically over a cliff.
Big thing. So yeah, you need to just plan for that. You know, you need to get help and plan, and it still makes sense. But sometimes companies just, I wanted to go through some of the things that at least give you a list. And again, give me your business card at the end of this, and I'll send you a copy of this presentation. And I also have an article that I wrote on it. It's kind of old, but I'll send you that. The article was also available on my website, so don't forget to give me your card. Okay, a few things on doing it right. Do your research. Really, you know, you got to spend the time, do the due diligence, do the research. A lot of companies just jump in. I had one client once that wanted to buy some molds for to mold some silicon parts, and they just went online, went to some mold manufacturer in China, bought the molds, and they call me up and says, "We're in trouble. We bought these molds. They're boat anchors. They're useless. Okay, do you know of another place, you know, to help us?" And I was able to hook them up with a company in Taiwan that I know was good to make the molds, and they were able to satisfy the customer. They were late, but they were able to do it, but they just didn't do the research and just placed a purchase order with somebody. Okay, and it wasn't even, you know, they had to pay it ahead of time. It wouldn't be where, you know, they could have you know, paid a little bit of deposit up front and says upon successful use or acceptance of the molds, then we'll pay the balance. They paid everything. Okay, identify your risk. You know, it's good to sit down. I sit down with a lot of clients to do a risk analysis, and we identify all the risks that are there, and then rank them from 1 to 10 based on severity. If it happens, what is it going to do to you? Okay, and some things aren't as severe as others, so you want to put a number, assign a number, usually from 1 to 10. And the other thing is the probability of occurrence. How likely is it to happen? And if something had a high severity, like an 8 or a 9, and it had an 8 or a 9 probability of occurrence, when you multiply those numbers, you get a number pretty close to 100. And usually when you look at all your risk, and you do this simple calculation, okay, it takes a team of people to do it, and a facilitator to do it for you, you're able to come up with what I call a risk priority number, and then you work on mitigating the ones that have high numbers. But it's a way to separate the risk. And you want to look at the risks that that have a high probability of happening, because if it has a low probability, you may not be as worried about it, and it's going to hurt you a lot. Some other things, if it happens, it's not going to hurt you all that much. Another thing is, I don't have time to get into the culture, but in these countries, especially China, the legal system is different, okay? Don't count on that supporting you. Us Americans, we love the contract. The contract means everything, not relationships, but when you deal with third world countries, it's more important that you have a good relationship with the person, because the contract is considered, like in China, as a formality. It's something, it's a rule. Like rules are, if you can follow it, okay. If you can't follow it, that's okay too. Us, if it's in the contract, you do it, or you wind up in court. Okay? Different there. Different there. You can't rely on the legal system and the contracts. So work on building the relationship. Too bad I don't have time to get into to more of cultural issues. It's real interesting and so important, especially for us uninformed Americans. I don't want to call us dumb Americans, but sometimes I'm a little more conscious of cultures, but most Americans are not, and I wasn't until I realized I needed it. I wasn't that way through my whole life. I was a typical uninformed American. Okay, again, your due diligence. I tell people you do due diligence real well once, and you do it 3 more times. Okay, you just can't do that enough. Do the work up front. Just don't jump into something. Okay, another thing, if you are operating a plant, if it's your plant, if it's some kind of joint venture where you're involved in the management of it, okay, the first thing is you want an in-country legal agent. It's real important there, okay, especially closing down. I helped a client, a UK client once, close down an operation in China, and they just wanted to walk away from it, and that would have been disastrous. Finally, I convinced them to not do that, okay? But when you do want to do any business there other than just buying something on a purchase order, work with getting a local agent. And not one, if you're going to do business in Guangzhou, don't get somebody from Hong Kong. You want someone local that's in the area that knows what's going on, a legal agent. Same thing for Latin America. You want to do that. Political affiliations, I mentioned it before. Get to know the local officials. That's usually the first step. Most Americans are in a hurry. They go over to these places. They want to meet with the company that day, start to talk business, where usually I tell them it takes a couple days to get down to business. The first thing is you bring the local officials to dinner. You bring maybe the people from the company, and you party a little bit. They want to get to know you. And then maybe on the second day or third day, you may want to start talking business, but you want to get this relationship going at the beginning. Another important thing to do is if you're going to do business, a joint venture, or if it's your own company, it's good to find another company in the region that has a foreign presence in it, either Europeans or North Americans, in there involved in the management, maybe not the general manager, and try to get in there and ask them if you can benchmark, if you can go in there, talk to them, and ask them some of the things that they did, some of the mistakes they made, some of the tips that they may have to help you being successful. And you're going to find Westerners are very open to let you in. But if it's something run by a Chinese operation, there's all Chinese running it, because they're so afraid of intellectual property, they're not going to let you in. So you need to find somebody who is with Westerners involved in there, and contact the Westerners. And a lot of times you can get in, and they tell you about who you have to be concerned about in the local politics, what things you need to do, what things they can help you with recruiting, with what works, what doesn't work. A lot of different things to help you through it, rather than you making all the mistakes. You can benefit by other people's mistakes. Here's another important thing. In most cases, a lot of times companies, if they're starting an operation, if it's their operation, either a joint venture or they're opening up their own, they want to send their person in to run it. In most cases, it doesn't make sense. You're better off hiring, you want somebody there to help the person, But the person running the day-to-day operations, in most cases, there are exceptions, should be a local person. You want someone who knows the local politicians, who can speak the language fluently, who knows how to operate within that region. And a foreigner really doesn't, okay? The other thing, if you're staffing it, there's a few things, a few positions you never want to have a foreigner in it. And still companies do it. Number one, the person in charge of legal. Why would you send a lawyer from another country into a country where that person doesn't know the law and have them run the legal department? Companies do it. I don't know why. Okay, so you want that. Human resources. Again, you can't have a foreigner do that. The person has to be part of that culture, part of that environment to operate in it. So those are two things. And the other one would be anything having to do with organizational development, process improvement, anything like that, that you really need a local person for it. Some of the other functions, you know, operations, purchasing, some of the other ones you probably can do that. But there are a few where you really don't want it, and it's worthwhile spending the time. Get a local managing director, and in Asia, that's what they call the person running the company, the president, the CEO, whatever you want to call it. It's a managing director. Yes?
I agree with your comment that you want a local person being the managing director, but at the same time, don't you want somebody from, say, this American company to kind of like see the whole operation, see if there's places where they need to be a little more efficient?
Yeah, you may want somebody, you put your person in there. You can put other positions. You can make that person, you know, the vice president of operations, another one vice president of quality. You know, you can have that, yeah. You want the people in there, maybe someone just assisting the person. But the actual person running it, you need a local person.
No,
yeah, you want a mixture. Yeah. One very well-run company in the Philippines that I did a lot of work for, they did it that way, a German-run company. A few key ones, they have it, and they had the other people that were there, but they had the local person running the company. Another thing is, really, before you get involved, if it's a major supplier or it's a joint venture or something like that, where they're a big supplier, not just you're buying a few components from, is do a comprehensive evaluation of their facilities. Most companies send in, the traditional thing is send in a quality person, they review their quality system, and that's about it. Okay, really, there's some other things you should look at before you decide to get in bed with a major supplier. You know, you want to look at their operations, okay, quality, and a lot of these third world countries, they don't have a continual improvement program. That's important. You want to look at that, not just how they do inspection, and if they have travelers and the traditional things that's done on a quality survey. If they are ISO 9000 registered, be a little careful, okay? I have come across good companies that had good systems in. I'm an ISO 9000 lead auditor. I do a lot of consulting in that area. And some of them are good, but most of them really are bad. I've been in companies that had an ISO 9001 certificate, and they had a quality manual with some of the elements not even addressed in it, and they had a certificate, okay? You know, you gotta touch on every element, okay, in your quality manual, or you're not going to get a certificate. But they don't have it, so you need to be careful. Social compliance, you want to be careful. If they have dormitories, you know, how they treat their people, because you can get hurt. Nike learned a bad lesson in the early 1990s, where the news media came into a supplier, shoe factory, in southern China, and they found a lot of violations. Slave labor, prison labor, child labor. They weren't feeding the people who lived in the dormitories properly. They were getting 3 meals a week that had protein in it. Otherwise, these people were living on rice and vegetables, okay? And that hit the news media, and it hurt them, and they lost a big part of their market share, and it took about 8 years to get that back, Nike. So you don't want that bad press, so you want social compliance auditing there. It's starting to improve, but there are still a lot of real violations where you have people don't have their own bed. You know, you have a typical dorm room in China, 9 people live in a dorm room about as big as this square here. This stands for here. 3 bunk beds. and that's how they live, yeah. And that's considered acceptable, but there are some worse situations. Okay, no heat, no air conditioning. Yeah. Okay. Another one is their accounting systems. That's real important. Take a look at that, because a lot of times, especially in China, it's getting better now, but in the past, China, everyone wanted to be a technical person. You know, they're graduating all these engineers, and there were no people that had business degrees, accounting degrees, and they're real poor. And you don't want to get in bed with a company who doesn't have a good accounting system and doesn't know if they're making money or not. Okay, and when I was at Timex, I would look at some of that. Okay, but I wasn't a real expert. You know, I did study accounting. I would look at it. If I seen anything funny, I would call the corporate office and we get a better person over there to review it, especially if we were going to do a joint venture, because we wanted to know if they really knew if they were making money or not, because you don't want to get involved with a company that thinks they're making money and is not, or the other way around. Okay, or is not making a lot of money and don't know it. They're usually bad news. So you can't always trust the sophistication of the accounting system, although it is getting better. Capacity and planning, that's another thing to look at, to make sure they do the right planning and capacity, so you don't have all of these shipment problems. I can tell you all kind of stories about running out of raw materials, all kind of issues that I've dealt with. Safety is another one. I have to tell you a funny story. I was doing work, I think it was back in my Timex days. And I was in China, and every time I'm there, I would get a call. Well, we're looking at this supplier. Go here while you're there. Go here, go there. And in fact, after I was there a few weeks, I stopped answering my phone if the next day I was going to get on a plane. A lot of times I get close, even at the airport, and I get sent back. I never got home. But one time I was told, go to this company. We want to do business with them. This, you know, an audit team that I had working for me was going to go in the next week, but they wanted me to go ahead of time and spend a little time with the company. If there were any major problems, give them an advance notice so they would do better with the formal audit that was going to happen. So I went there, and I toured the facility, and I noticed there were no fire extinguishers. I said, you're not going to pass the audit. You need fire extinguishers, okay? Because we don't want your building to burn down. I don't think you do. You know, we want to have product. If the building burns down, you don't have it. Oh, how many do we need? So I told him, you need fire extinguishers. They need to be spaced so much. I gave him the guidelines. And a week later, we're passing by the factory, and most factories look the same. It's hard to tell one from the other. This one was somewhat unique. So I was with another person who worked for me, which was a local Hong Kong person. I says, TW, I want to stop there and follow up. But we can't go there. The guys, we have to give notice, you know. I says, I want to go there. No, we can't do it. I says, okay, you go to the ferry dock, go back to Hong Kong, have the driver drop me off, because I'm going in there. So we pull up to the gate. He was going to call him. I says, don't call him. So he talks to the guard, says we're here. Manager comes running out. Why didn't you tell me? You know, you were coming and everything. I says, well, we're passing by. We have about an hour. We're going to wait at the ferry dock for the ferry to go back to Hong Kong, and we wanted to stop by to make sure that you did everything. I said, did you do this, this, and this? Yeah. Did you get the fire extinguishers? Yeah, I got them. I said, well, let me see them. So he's all proud. He's walking me and hanging up. I look at the gauge, down to 0. Scratching my head. I pick it up. Ding, 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 empty. Yeah. Empty. He didn't realize he had to put something in them. He bought empty cans. Okay? So I have so many other, I could be here, I'll keep you all night to tell you the story. But yeah, that was one thing with safety. So safety is another big thing. Safety glasses. I have been going to China since about 1992, and I was there, I think, in 2005, and I saw my first pair of safety glasses. Never even seen a pair. The guy was working on a lathe, had safety glasses on. I was shocked. Yeah. Okay. You see construction workers with open shoes and with sandals on. Forget about safety shoes. Yeah. So even on road gangs, you know, normally you see a whole lot of people there with little 1-kilo hammers and little chisels chopping up the road, rather than having a pneumatic drill, you know, to chop it up. Yeah. And once there, a few years ago, I was there, and all of a sudden somebody was, and they finally, you know, did it. because they have so much labor, they just give people a whole lot of hammers, yeah. So those are some of the things you see. Okay. You want to also make sure there's an adequate English-speaking professional staff. I had one nightmare where there was one person who spoke English, and he was everything. And sometimes, to speak to this guy, because he was getting constant